The year was 1879, and the prairie burned beneath the weight of a merciless sun. Dry winds swept across the tall grass, bending it like the spines of those who couldn't survive out here. It was a land that demanded everything: your strength, your faith, and sometimes even your soul. And in the middle of it, three women stood alone. Clara's boots sank into the cracked earth as she adjusted the strap of her rifle across her back. Her face was sunburnt, dust clinging to her skin like a second layer. She scanned the horizon, eyes sharp, jaw tight. Somewhere beyond the haze of heat rising off the land, a storm was gathering. Not in the sky, but in her blood. She could feel it coming. Behind her, June limped slightly, favoring her right ankle. The bandage wrapped around it had long since unraveled, but she kept going without complaint. Her dress was torn at the hem, a smear of dried blood on her collar. Once, she'd been a preacher's daughter, soft-spoken and sweet. But out here, sweetness had no place. And then there was May, quiet, observant, with eyes like a still pond hiding something deep beneath. She carried nothing but a small satchel and a rusted pocket knife she'd stolen from a man who'd tried to take more than just her pride. Her silence unnerved most folks. Clara understood it. Pain like theirs didn't always scream. It simmered. 3 days ago, they'd been wives. 3 days ago, they'd still believed their suffering had purpose. Now they were survivors. The betrayal had come in the dead of night. No warning, no fight, just the sound of saddles creaking and whispers slicing through the dark. May had been the first to wake. She'd heard Caleb, her husband, muttering to the others. "We leave 'em. No food, no water, no use anymore." His voice wasn't even angry. It was cold, practical, like tossing out spoiled meat. She'd shaken Clara awake, her voice trembling. They're leaving. Clara had known it would happen. Maybe not like this, maybe not so soon, but men like theirs didn't stay. They didn't love. They possessed. June hadn't believed it, not until she saw Luke ride off without even glancing back, the man who'd once kissed her knuckles and promised her forever. They'd been left with nothing, just their torn dresses, a few drops of water, and each other. Now Clara led them west. Toward what, she didn't know. Maybe a trading post, maybe a river, maybe just a way. She stopped at a rise in the land, shielding her eyes from the sun. A speck moved in the distance. Horsemen, 2, maybe 3. "Get down," she hissed. They dropped into the grass, hearts pounding. The riders were too far to see clearly, but instinct screamed louder than logic. Danger. Out here, men didn't approach women for good reason, and they were in no state to fight. Clara gritted her teeth. She hated the feeling of helplessness. She reached for the rifle slung across her back, her fingers brushing the worn wood. It wasn't loaded, hadn't been since the night they were abandoned, but the feel of it gave her something to hold on to. The riders veered south, disappearing into a gulch. Silence returned, but it didn't feel safe. It felt like a warning. They kept moving. By sunset, the prairie had turned gold, the sky streaked with bruises of purple and blue. The girls found shelter beneath an outcropping of stone, a jagged cave just deep enough to offer some protection. May sat with her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes unfocused. June pressed her back against the stone, her breath shaky. Clara kept watch, the rifle across her lap, eyes never leaving the horizon. "We can't keep walking forever," June said finally, her voice raw. "We won't," Clara replied, her tone steel. "We're not running. We're finding a way to fight." May's gaze flicked to her. With what? Clara didn't answer. Not yet, but deep inside her, something had shifted. Survival wasn't enough anymore. She wasn't just going to outlast them, she was going to make them pay. The fire they built that night was small, more smoke than flame, nestled between the stone walls of their crude shelter. It cast flickering shadows that danced across the girls' faces, giving them the look of ghosts, half here, half gone. They didn't talk much. Words felt useless in a world that had taken so much from them. Clara crouched near the fire, her hands steady as she scraped the last of a rabbit they'd managed to trap. The meat was stringy and bitter, but it was warm, and it kept them alive. June stared into the flames like she was waiting for something, maybe a sign, maybe an answer. She hadn't spoken since sunset, Not really, just quiet nods and the occasional shiver. May sat apart, her back to the wall, fingers wrapped around a rock she hadn't let go of since the night her husband left. Clara didn't ask why. She knew. Sometimes you needed to hold on to something, anything, to remind yourself you were still there. The silence was broken by the distant howl of a coyote, then another. Close. Clara stiffened. She reached for the rifle out of instinct. "Don't worry," May said quietly. "They don't hunt us. Just lonely." Clara wasn't sure who she was talking about, the coyotes or the women. They slept in shifts. Clara took first watch. Her eyes scanned the dark, every rustle of the grass, every flicker of wind pulling her nerves tighter. She didn't trust the night. It had teeth. Just before dawn, movement caught her eye. A figure on horseback, alone. She knelt quickly, nudging May awake. "Someone's coming." May sat up instantly, her hand reaching for the knife hidden beneath her skirt. Clara didn't have to say more. June stirred but didn't speak. Fear had a way of making you efficient. The rider approached slowly, not charging, not sneaking, just coming. Clara stepped forward, her body blocking the others. The rifle in her hands wasn't loaded, but the stranger didn't know that. He stopped a few feet away. He was young, maybe 30, with a weathered face and the kind of stillness that came from long hours in the saddle. His horse shifted beneath him, agitated, but he sat calm. "Name's Eli," he said finally, voice low and even. "Saw your fire last night. Wasn't sure if you were alive or bait." Clara didn't lower the rifle. "We're alive." He nodded, taking a slow look at the three of them. "Looks like hell's been riding close behind you." "It has," May said flatly from the back. He swung down from his horse slowly, not reaching for any weapon. "Ain't looking for trouble. Just figured, no one makes a fire like that unless they're desperate." "We don't need your pity," Clara snapped. Eli looked at her, and there was no mockery in his eyes, just quiet understanding. "Didn't say you did." A beat passed. June rose to her feet, her eyes sunken but clear. "You got food?" He nodded. "Jerky, some dried apples, couple canteens of water." Clara didn't speak. Her pride wouldn't let her ask. But June stepped forward. "Then sit," she said. "If you mean no harm, share the fire." Eli hesitated, then lowered himself to the ground. He tossed the sack forward. "Eat." They tore into it like wolves, not bothering with manners. Clara watched him while she chewed, trying to read him. There was something quiet about him. Not soft, not weak, just worn. He didn't ask questions. He didn't try to touch them. And that made Clara trust him a little more than she wanted to. "You running from someone?" he asked finally. "No," Clara said. "We're running towards something." Eli raised a brow. "What's that?" May looked up, her eyes hard. "Vengeance." For the first time, Eli smiled. Not wide, not cruel, just knowing. "Then you're headed in the right direction." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of dust and ash. Clara leaned back against the rock, chewing slowly, her mind already spinning. They had a chance now. A man with a horse, a man with supplies, maybe even a man with enemies of his own. She didn't trust easily, but she knew opportunity when it sat across the fire and said its name. Eli. They'd need him, because the men who left them were still out there. And this time, the prairie wouldn't hide them. The next morning, the prairie was veiled in a fine mist, softening the jagged edges of the world. Dew clung to the grass like fragile glass beads, and the rising sun painted everything in hues of gold and steel. It looked peaceful, almost beautiful, but none of them were fooled. Beauty didn't mean safety, not out here. They rode in silence, Eli in front, guiding them through a narrow pass lined with wind-smooth stones. Clara kept close behind, her fingers wrapped tight around the reins of the mare he'd let her ride. May and June followed, wrapped in borrowed coats, their eyes scanning every shadow. They hadn't spoken much since they'd left the ridge. There were no more questions to ask, only answers to chase. By mid-morning, they found tracks, fresh ones, wagon wheels, horses, 3, maybe 4 riders. Clara dismounted, crouching low to the earth. She ran her fingers over the grooves in the dirt, They're not far. Eli joined her, nodding. Probably half a day ahead. Not riding hard. They think you're dead. Clara's jaw tightened. Good, she thought. Let them think that. Let them feel safe. June knelt beside her, her eyes hard now, more alert than they'd seen in days. Then we catch them before they make camp. May said nothing, but she was already checking the pistol Eli had handed her earlier. It had one shot left. One was all she needed. They moved with purpose now, a small, silent storm gathering speed. The prairie stretched wide open, but Eli knew the land. He led them through gullies, across dry stream beds, around ridges that hid their approach. By late afternoon, they saw smoke curling into the sky. Clara raised her hand, signaling for them to stop. Below them, nestled in the crook of a shallow valley, sat a makeshift camp. A wagon, 3 men, 1 fire, and the past, sitting right there waiting for them. Clara felt the cold wash over her, not fear, clarity. She could see Tom by the fire, his pipe glowing like the night she last saw him. Rex stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes scanning the horizon without seeing. And Sam sat hunched, looking smaller than Clara remembered, more fragile, like time had already started pulling him apart. They don't look like much, May said, voice low. Doesn't take much to destroy everything, Clara replied. Eli watched them, his face unreadable. You sure about this? Clara looked at him. They left us to die. They thought they'd erased us. We're not here for mercy. He nodded once. Then I'll get you close. But this is your fight. That was the deal. He wasn't a savior, just a witness. Maybe a reckoning. They circled wide, staying low, using the terrain as cover. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching long over the valley. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of smoke and sweat and something older, like blood buried deep in the dirt. As they neared, June reached for Clara's hand. I'm not the same girl I was, she whispered. I just want you to know that. Clara squeezed her fingers. Neither am I. They crept down the ridge like shadows, silent and sure. Eli hung back, rifle slung across his shoulder, eyes sharp as a hawk's. Then it happened. May moved first. She stepped into the firelight. Tom saw her. For a second, his face didn't change, like his brain refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. Then, you, he breathed. May didn't speak. She raised the pistol. He lunged. The shot rang out, shattering the stillness. Tom dropped to his knees, blood blooming through his shirt. The camp exploded into chaos. Clara charged forward, tackling Rex before he could draw. They hit the dirt hard, rolling in a tangle of limbs and fury. He snarled, slamming a fist into her ribs, but she didn't feel it. She found the knife at her belt, jammed it upward. He screamed. June had Sam cornered by the wagon. He held his hands up, trembling, tears already pooling in his eyes. Please, he whimpered. I didn't want to leave you. I swear You did, she said. Then she turned her back and walked away. Clara rose, her chest heaving, blood on her hands and in her mouth. She looked around. It was over. The fire crackled on. Tom lay still. Rex groaned, barely alive. Sam sat weeping in the dirt. And the women? They stood, tall, unbroken, free. The prairie wind picked up, carrying away the scent of blood, replacing it with dust and something cleaner. Clara turned to Eli, who hadn't moved, just watched. He nodded once. You did what you came to do. Clara nodded back. They didn't need saving. They were their own salvation. And the prairie, wild and cruel as it was, had finally bowed its head in respect. They buried Tom where he fell. Rex didn't live long enough to see the morning. Sam. They didn't bury Sam. He was still alive when they rode away. Clara had looked back once, just once, and saw him kneeling there in the dirt, his hands shaking, eyes hollowed out by guilt or fear. Maybe both. She didn't care which. He'd been given a second chance, and that was already more than he deserved. The prairie was quiet that day, not still, never still, but quiet in a way that felt like breath being held. Like the land itself was watching, waiting to see what they would become now that their ghosts were behind them. Eli rode ahead, guiding them through low hills dusted with sun-baked grass. His silhouette was steady, his silence welcome. He didn't ask questions. He didn't offer comfort. He just rode, and that was enough. Clara followed close, her coat flapping against the wind, her rifle slung low. May rode beside her, face calm but unreadable, the kind of stillness born from surviving too much too fast. June, once timid and soft-spoken, kept up easily now, her eyes sharp, her hands always resting near her pistol. They didn't speak much, not because there was nothing to say, but because everything that mattered had already been spoken in blood and dust. At dusk, they made camp beside a dry creek bed, the kind that only ran heavy in the spring. The fire they built was small, just enough for warmth, just enough to keep the darkness on us. Eli sat apart, oiling his rifle with the slow patience of a man who had seen what the world does to those who rush. Clara cleaned her knife, methodically scraping away dried blood with the edge of a flat stone. The sparks of the fire danced in her eyes, reflecting something deeper than rage, something more dangerous. May poked at the fire with a stick, silent. June stared up at the stars, her arms wrapped around her knees, lips moving slightly. A prayer, maybe, or just a memory she didn't want to forget. Clara finally broke the silence. "We could head west," she said, voice rough. "There's land out there. No one to tell us where we can or can't go." May nodded slowly. "Or north. Canada doesn't care who you used to be." "Or south," June added, surprising them both. "I met a woman once. Said you can disappear in Mexico if you know how to ride and don't mind heat." Clara gave a small smile almost. "Funny. All this time we were following them. Now we've got more directions than we know what to do with." Eli glanced up. "You got time to decide. No rush now." They fell silent again, the fire crackling softly. In the distance, a coyote howled, a high, lonely sound that faded into the prairie's wide emptiness. After a while, June spoke again. "What if we're not done?" Clara looked at her. "What do you mean?" "What if there are more like us?" June's voice trembled, not with fear, but something close to hope. "Other women, out there, trapped, hurt, waiting." Clara didn't answer right away. She stared into the fire, watching the wood split and crumble, orange embers spinning into the air like fireflies. Finally, she said, "Then maybe we find them." May looked up. Her eyes were tired but not empty. "And what? Ride in like ghosts and clean up the mess?" "If we don't," Clara said, "who will?" Eli stood, brushing dirt from his coat. "Lot of men out there who think women are soft," he said, slinging his rifle across his back. "They count on it." Clara rose too, her spine straight, the fire painting her face in hard shadows. Then it's time they started counting wrong. The wind kicked up, scattering ashes across the creek bed. The night stretched wide, full of stars and silence, and 100 unseen paths. And somewhere out there, past the hills and rivers and smoke-choked towns, were women who hadn't yet learned what Clara and the others now knew in their bones. That survival wasn't enough. Now they wanted justice, or maybe vengeance. Whatever it was, it started tonight. They doused the fire and rode out beneath a black sky, the moon a silver blade over their shoulders. No words, no promises. Just grit in their teeth and steel in their hearts. They didn't look back. There was nothing left behind worth seeing. Only what lay ahead, and it was theirs. The town of Dry Ridge sat like a blister on the edge of the frontier, cracked, hot, and festering with the kind of men who believed the world owed them something just for surviving it. Its saloon leaned with age, shutters dangling on one hinge, and the jailhouse door hung crooked from a recent brawl no one bothered to fix. Clara and the others rode in at midday, dust trailing behind them like ghosts. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. 4 women and a Lakota man didn't exactly blend in, especially not when their eyes were sharp, their hands close to their weapons, and their posture screamed, "We're not here for drinks or conversation." Clara swung down first, boots hitting the ground with the sure weight of someone who knew how to make an exit. Or an entrance. Eli scanned the street, his jaw tight. "Place stinks." "That's because it's full of rotting men who call themselves law," Clara muttered. May stayed close to June, her hand lightly brushing the girl's back as they passed a group of gamblers loitering near the saloon. One of them whistled low. "Look what the wind dragged in," he said, gold tooth flashing. Clara didn't flinch. She turned slowly, fixing him with a stare so cold it could have iced over the sun. "You say something?" she asked, voice flat. The man faltered. The laughter from his buddies dried up quick. He lifted his hands. "Just admiring is all." Clara took a step forward. "Next time, admire the dust." He shrank back, and they moved on. The sheriff's office was at the far end of town. A warped sign dangled overhead, barely readable. Inside, a man sat with his boots on his desk, hat over his eyes, a half-empty bottle of bourbon swaying with the creak of his chair. He didn't even look up when Clara knocked the door open with a flat palm. "What's this, then?" he grumbled. "Ladies come to report a lost kitten?" Eli stepped inside, rifle slung but visible. The sheriff sat up a little straighter. "Now hold on." Clara tossed a folded paper onto his desk. It was yellowed, creased, and stamped with blood at the corner. A wanted poster. "Name's Merritt Rourke," she said. "Seen him?" The sheriff scanned the paper. "You're hunting him? Man's got a price on his head from here to El Paso." "We know," May said, stepping into the room. "Word is he's running a camp north of here," Clara continued. "He's taken 2 more girls in the last month. One was 14. The sheriff scratched his chin. "And you're planning what? Some kind of rescue mission?" "We're planning on ending it," Clara said. June stood at the doorway, arms crossed. "And we're not asking your permission." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "This ain't a vigilante town." Clara leaned in close. "No, it's a coward's town. You know what he's done. You just don't want to get your boots muddy doing anything about it." Silence stretched like leather pulled too tight. Eli shifted. "We're leaving. Either point us the right way or keep sitting on your hands." Finally, the sheriff sighed. "North, 2 days out. Canyon pass by a dead elm. Don't take the main trail. He's got lookouts." Clara nodded once. "Appreciate the honesty." They turned to leave. "Hey," the sheriff called after them. "What if you don't make it back?" Clara looked over her shoulder. "Then bury us proud." They rode out by dusk, the prairie swallowing the town behind them. The trail was rougher now, more rocks than grass, more cliffs than comfort. Nights were colder, days hotter. But the closer they got, the more their silence thickened into purpose. At the canyon's edge, they stopped. Ahead in the distance, smoke curled upward. A small fire, tucked in the shadows of rock and thyme. The outlaw camp. Eli spoke first. "We go in quiet. No glory." May checked her revolver. "Just justice." Clara unsheathed her knife. "No mercy." They moved like shadows, boots muffled in dirt, breath held tight. June slipped ahead, light on her feet, eyes sweeping for traps. She'd learned fast, faster than anyone expected. And when they saw the girl, the one with the torn dress, bound by the wrist to a post, everything sharpened. All the training, all the pain, all the fire they'd swallowed now burned into one single aim. They were no longer the hunted. They were the storm. The fire crackled low in the outlaw camp, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts across the canyon walls. Laughter echoed from the men seated around the flames, sharp, cruel, the kind that came from throats used to getting away with things. Merritt Rourke lounged against a log, his hat tipped low, a half-burnt cigar clenched between his teeth. His eyes flicked to the bound girl tied to the wooden post at the center of the clearing. She couldn't have been more than 15. Her cheeks were hollow, her wrists raw. "You boys get some shut-eye," Rourke drawled, flicking ash toward the dirt. "We ride at dawn." They didn't see the shadows moving at the edge of the light. Clara struck first, her knife cutting through the dark like a whisper. One man dropped, a gurgle in his throat the only sound he made. Eli followed close, his rifle raised, eyes like steel. June moved fast, slipping past the guard on the right, her boot catching his knee before he could shout. He crumpled. May fired once, clean. The bullet struck true. Then came the yelling, panic breaking through the camp like a wild animal. Guns were drawn. Boots scrambled in the dirt. Rourke rose, cursing, his revolver flashing as he fired into the trees. Clara didn't flinch. She lunged through the smoke, her blade finding a mark. A scream, then silence. Rourke saw her too late. She tackled him to the ground, her fist landing hard against his jaw. He twisted, elbowing her ribs. but she held fast, eyes blazing. "You remember me now?" she growled, driving her knee into his chest. Rourke grunted, spitting blood. "You're dead," he hissed. "No," Clara said, pressing her knife against his throat. "But you are." Behind her, the others freed the girl. May wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, whispering soft words. June stood watch, her pistol steady. Eli approached slowly, his rifle lowered. "We done here?" he asked. Clara's breath came heavy. Rourke squirmed beneath her. "Almost." Her hand didn't shake. The blade sank deep. Rourke jerked once, then went still. The fire popped. They buried the bodies before dawn, simple graves, unmarked. Rourke's deeper than the rest. Clara made sure of that. The girl, whose name was Hannah, clung to May's side as they packed up what few supplies the outlaws had left behind. When they rode away from the canyon, the sun was rising over the prairie, casting gold across the broken rocks and blood-soaked dirt. They didn't look back. Back in Dry Ridge, the sheriff stood on the porch, hat in hand as they returned. He watched them with something like awe, or maybe fear. Clara didn't stop, didn't speak, just rode past him like smoke on the wind. They kept riding, not to return to what was lost, but to build something new, something that couldn't be taken. Clara, Eli, June, May, and now Hannah. They weren't just survivors. They were a legend in the making.